Hello there. Thanks for tuning in. This is Ben Crocker with the Threads podcast, Life Unfiltered, episode number 31, The Ben Show. Typically, Threads is a show hosted by more than just one person, and that person that's typically on, other than me, is Jason Thierry. Jason and I started this podcast as an experiment in vulnerability, and we wanted to model what conversations between two dudes could look like, and show that when two dudes get together, they don't always just talk about, hot chicks, fast bikes, or whatever else the guys are into. It was a really poor attempt at framing up the typical male, but nonetheless, Threads podcast is a chance for real conversations about things that matter to happen. It gives us a platform to challenge and encourage one another on the show, and also to be inspired and moved and pushed to do things that maybe we wouldn't necessarily be comfortable doing. And that goes for Jason and I as hosts, as well as our listening audience. Today's episode is a little bit different because, well, it's just me. It's just me. That's a lot of pressure. I feel like I can't stop for, thoughtful pauses because I've got to carry on a conversation with myself. So apologies in advance if this show is a little bit more rough around the edges. After all, Threads is about life unfiltered. So it's fitting. Life, to be honest, has thrown us in the Crocker home quite a few curveballs since school let out. Change is hard for any kid, and as I mentioned on the previous episode, change is really hard for our kids. If you haven't caught on yet, my wife Andy and I adopted 2 kids from the foster care system, and that is how we chose to start our family. It has been an incredible, difficult, challenging, energy-sapping adventure. I wouldn't trade it for the world. I love my kids to pieces, but man, it's hard. It is so hard sometimes, especially with my daughter. She just does not handle change well, and it really goes back to the fact that before she came to be with our family, she had a significant amount of trauma that she experienced. It's unfair. It's not right. It's unacceptable. Let me just say it. It's unacceptable that biological parents do the things they do to their kids. It drives me batty. Keeps me up at night. It's also unacceptable that a family member, a relative, chose to adopt our beautiful daughter and then gave up on her. That happened. And not only that, but somehow this relative decided to keep the sibling of our daughter. So imagine the rejection she carries. It's deep. When things like changes in routine happen, it brings up all of this fear, all of this doubt, all of these feelings of, I know what this is. This is change. Change is bad. Look at all the change that happened before, and look how it destroyed my life. So therefore, in her mind, any change is bad and difficult and life-altering, even if it's just the end of the school year, even if it's just the end of 4th grade at her current school building. To her, it feels like that life-altering change. So she snaps and reacts, and it's very difficult. So that's kind of where we're at right now. The school year's wrapped up, and My wife and I were feeling it. Boy, are we feeling it. It's just been very difficult. I don't want to, tell too much of the story out of respect for my daughter. It's her story to tell someday, but it's been very challenging walking with her through this time of transition. And, being the brunt of her anger and frustration at the end of the day. And at the end of the day, sometimes you just don't have the energy to do things like sit down and record a podcast episode with your husband. So that's why it's just me tonight. Not only is my wife kind of in the thick of it with our daughter, but she's also taking part in a pretty intense training this weekend for work. And she just, understandably so, doesn't quite have the bandwidth to sit down and record a podcast episode with her husband. I totally understand. And she told me that she felt like she was letting me down or failing me in some way. And I just said to her, you know what? I would feel like I was letting you down and failing you if I expected you to sit down and do an episode of Threads after the week that you've had. So I just love it when we're on the same page. I knew it just wasn't going to work. And we were actually supposed to record last night, but that didn't happen because, well, it was a repeat of tonight. There's just been some rough nights around here, but we're getting through it. And the good news is the transition time is starting to become routine now. Our daughter is getting settled into her summer plans, and we haven't seen that behavior that started up when school ended. So yeah, it's been a doozy of a week, that's for sure. How are you doing? I feel like I have to fill in, and make this conversational. Clearly you can't reply in this moment, but no matter where you're at in life, I just wanted to say you're awesome because you're listening to Threads. And that really does mean a lot to us. We're approaching our 1-year anniversary, and it has been quite the experience. And thank you for being a part of this, whether you're a new listener or you've been listening since the very beginning. It's pretty awesome that we get to do this and have you join us on this journey. Well, since this is the Ben Show, I kind of call the shots. And the first thing I want to do is just give you an introduction to what this episode is going to be like from here on out. I have just some random segments that I've developed. Each one of them has 2 items that go along with it. So you can expect, it's almost like a little bit of a show and tell. To get things started, the first segment is 2 personal updates. Now, I know I already shared one, so I guess really you're getting 3. Not only do you get to hear about life after the school year wraps up in the Crocker home, but you also get to hear 2 other interesting happenings from my week. The first one I am super excited about. For the last 5 years, I have had a dream of owning my very own, can you guess? Any ideas? Private jet, my own business. All those things would be cool, but no, I have dreamed of owning a kayak. And friends, last night I bought a kayak. I couldn't be more happy. It has been a dream come true. I love being out on the water. I love paddling around. I love going down rivers, paddling in ponds and lakes. There's something so transformational about being outside in the great outdoors. I just feel like I connect so much with myself and with my surroundings. And it's a source of energy for me to be outside. So to finally have my own kayak is incredible. Now, in order to get that kayak, I used what's called Brother points. Brother, if you're not familiar with the brand, is a manufacturer of sewing equipment, sewing machines, threads. I had to get that in there. Threads, they're not a sponsor of Threads, but perhaps I should approach them about that. But not only does Brother make sewing equipment, but they also make printers and copiers, the desktop versions. And in my job, I sell Brother equipment. And recently I sold to a city. So lots of different offices within City Hall, the fire department, police department, all of those. So in exchange for making that sale, Brother rewarded me with some points. And those points are essentially like Brother dollars, I guess you could say. You can redeem those Brother points for big ticket items, for gift cards, whatever the case may be. So I used mine to get some Cabela's gift cards so that I could go and purchase a kayak. I spent weeks researching this. From the time those devices were installed, I was plotting and dreaming and thinking about which kayak I wanted. I settled on the Ascend H10 hybrid kayak, and it has been incredible. I took it home and got my roof rack figured out and took pictures of the kayak once it was set up and sent those to my wife, and she writes back, "If you want to go out now, that's fine. I'll take care of putting Miracle to bed." I was like, wait, really? No way. So I went out at 10 o'clock at night, went down the street to the lake that's close to our house, and put the kayak in and took a flashlight with me and paddled in the dark. It was joyous. I loved every second of it. And then today after work, I went to a different lake and paddled around and just enjoyed the quiet and watching nature. It was just incredible. So that's number one, my first update. I bought a kayak and I could not be happier. And I'm already looking forward to tomorrow's adventures. I feel like a whole new world of adventure and discovery is open to me. And that excites me so much. Perhaps I'll do a live stream from my kayak. But knowing me and my klutziness, I'd probably drop the phone in the lake. And that doesn't sound too good. But, all right, moving on to the second update, which, of course, is connected to my first update. See, all these threads, they just all come together. I wonder why we picked the name Threads. Well, number two has to do with my employment as well. I hit a milestone in my life, and that would be having the longest time frame of employment at one employer. For me, that is now 5 years. I never thought that I would get into the world of sales. I'm an introvert by nature, and I get pissed off by slimy salespeople. I did not want to be that guy. And for the first year or so, I worked so hard to not be that guy that I kind of lost sight of, who I am and what I bring to the table. So once I realized that I was trying too hard to not be somebody, I just decided, I'm just going to be me. And people are just going to have to deal with that. If I'm too pushy or demanding, well, oh well. I'm not upsetting anybody. This this job in sales has really helped me let go of worrying about how people see me or what they think of me. That fear and anxiety used to run so deep in my life. And being in sales each day, walking into places that I'm trying to do business with, and there's no shame in my game. Like, I'm pretty clear in my intentions as I talk to people. I'm here to get to know you and to find out if we're going to be a good fit for each other. If we're going to be a good fit, then let's get to know each other and identify ways that my company can help your company. And let's do this thing. And it's just so much fun to be able to do that and not worry about what the person sitting at the front desk is thinking about me. Because really, it doesn't matter. So what if they give me a sideways glance? I'd probably give a sideways glance too if some salesman just walked into my office and struck up a conversation with me. Like, that's not necessarily normal, and that's okay. I become okay with it. So to hit 5 years, that's pretty awesome. I went to college, but I certainly did not study business. I don't think I took any business classes. I didn't take any marketing or sales or accounting or anything that would be helpful to this position. My major in college was youth ministry. Yes, youth ministry. There's actually quite a few implications, and I found my education certainly useful, even in the sales world. Because if you can sell Jesus, you can sell just about anything. It's really what it boils down to. No, I mean, that's a little oversimplified, but there's some truth to that. My youth ministry classes definitely taught me how to interact with people and how to structure messages and how to appeal to people and how to communicate effectively. So it's not like it was completely wasted. I'm just using my education in a very different way. And I've been doing that for 5 years now. It's just crazy. The reason I made the switch was I had a very bad couple of experiences, 2 in a row, in ministry. And you would think that people who do God's work, you'd think that they'd be treated fairly or respectfully. And unfortunately, that didn't happen at my last place of employment. I was always being put down by those above me. It was like I could never measure up to their standards and expectations. It's like they had this bar that was set so high, and they expected all of their staff members to hit that bar and to be just this way. And it was like a box. This is how you're expected to act. This is how you're expected to think. This is what you're expected to do. And you do anything outside of this box, and it's not going to work. And we're going to call you out on it. And we're going to ream you a new one every time that you do something that's outside of that box. And wow, that was rough. I'm an outside the box kind of guy. So I stepped out of the box quite a bit. And honestly, I don't think I did anything wrong by stepping out of the box. But it was not in line with their vision and goals at that nonprofit that I worked for. It was not a church. It was a nonprofit, and it was very difficult. So I got out of that pretty quickly. Needed a job, so I started applying to everything that I could find. And the first job that I found was my current position. Imagine that. It was like God had something waiting for me at the end of that bad experience. And, it sucks that bad experience at the nonprofit followed a pretty rough experience out in Oregon. I found myself in a position that I wasn't prepared for. I wasn't necessarily the best fit. In addition to that, my relationship with my supervisor was pretty strained. And, I was asked to resign. That's the church's way of saying you're fired, but we're going to make you just resign so that it doesn't look bad. Again, that's an oversimplification. It's not entirely true, but there is a hint of truth to that view. So yeah, that was an interesting time in life. So now I have collectively, I think, 2006 to 2012, 6 years of full-time youth ministry experience. Actually, you go another year out, a couple years after that, actually. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I did youth ministry for about 8 years and at 3 different places. And now I'm out of youth ministry. I have been for the last 5 years, and I've been at one employer for all 5 of those years. So that's pretty incredible. And I don't have any intention of changing things up. I feel like I've got a good thing going with this sales gig. The company that I work for has super strong values that are in line with my faith, in line with how my family operates. I couldn't ask for a better spot to land professionally. It's been incredible. So those are my 2 things that I wanted to mention as part of my personal update. The next segment that I have for you on this Ben show is just a quick recap of a couple of points that really stood out to me from episode 30 that Jason and I did together. Jason talked a lot about his financial situation. I guess really not just his financial situation, but that of he and his wife, Megan. And they were having some rough conversations about how they spend their money, and Megan was starting to step up and call Jason out a little bit on some of his spending habits. And that was a really good conversation. I really enjoyed hearing from Jason as to what that's been like for him. I appreciate so much the fact that Jason is just a no bullshit kind of guy. He is very much what you see is what you get. And sometimes it drives me absolutely batty because he has absolutely no filter. I think it's okay to have a filter sometimes, especially if that filter is going to help assuage. I don't know if that's the right word. If that filter is going to help prevent harm being done to a relationship, I feel like filters can be acceptable in those circumstances. But not with Jason. He's very much just say whatever's on your mind. And so I really appreciated everything he had to say about finances. And he took a topic that's very difficult to have an open, honest conversation about. Nobody likes to be real about their financial problems. We all have them to some degree. And yet we really try hard to not let on to the fact that we're struggling. But Jason just kind of came out and said, this is where we're at. And it's really hard because I'm a spender and I like to buy shiny things. And it was really refreshing to hear his honesty in that regard and to hear about the progress that he and Megan are making. That takes a lot of work to, change the course of that ship. And I think the reason why that story kind of jumps out at me as I think back on that episode is because it's very similar to where my wife, Andy, and I are. For a while, we were using a budget software program, but it just didn't work. And I don't know if it didn't work because we didn't really give it our full attention, or maybe we just didn't know what we were doing with it. But we both spent way outside of the parameters we had set. And then we found ourselves in the spot of being short money and having to move funds around from places and, putting things on credit cards. And it's just like, we make way too much money to be having to do this kind of money stuff. So to hear Jason talk about their situation, it was refreshing because we're right there too. We're fighting through, we're working on a different spreadsheet and trying to take out cash for things like spending so that we don't, just swipe the card and totally lose track of where we're at financially. So we're really trying to be disciplined in that. And, this isn't something that we're doing because Jason and Megan are doing it. It's just really cool how, again, the threads in life, Jason and his wife and Andy and I, we're on the same page in that regard. And to be able to talk openly and honestly about where we're at financially is really good. I feel like there's so many people in America who are afraid to talk about money. And I don't know why, but it's like you don't ever talk to somebody about how much money they make or, what their bills are, things like that. Well, why not? I think America in general has a major problem with debt and a major problem with foolish financial choices. And perhaps maybe if we talked openly and honestly about stuff like that, we wouldn't find ourselves in the predicaments that we often do. So just some food for thought. So Jason, I really appreciated you opening up about where you and Megan are at. And I commend you in the progress that you've been making in that regard. Another commonality that was brought up again and has been talked about numerous times on our show is the fact that praying with our wives especially, it just feels so awkward. And it's like that awkwardness, thinking about it, causes me to not even pursue praying with my wife. And we put a poll on Facebook to see if we were alone in feeling like this. And I think it was like 70% admitted that it's awkward to talk with their significant other about faith. Why is that? I think maybe part of it is for so long we've heard of having a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And I think that might be a little bit backwards. I don't think that our relationship with Jesus Christ is just supposed to be for us. But that's what we were sold. And so anything that is contrary to that idea feels awkward. And I think that's probably a big part of why it feels awkward to pray with my wife. The other thing is, it's not like I'm worried about what her reaction is going to be, but maybe I am, actually. Yeah, I probably am. Like, what's she going to say if I just all of a sudden, before we go to bed, say, hey, let's pray? We tried that for a while, and but at the end of the day, the only thing my wife wants to do is sleep. I can't blame her for that. So, yeah. I would love to hear your input on this. If you're married or if you're dating, you have a significant other in your life, what's it like with your faith? Is it something you practice together? Or is it more of just a personal thing? And is it okay that it's more of a personal thing? So many different directions I could take this. If this was a Bible study, I would whip out my Bible and read passages about community and everything else, but that's not what this is. So I'll spare you from that, even though the pastor in me wants to, pound some Bible verses in you. No, actually, I don't. That's not how I roll. Speaking of rolling, I'm going to roll on to the next segment. This next segment is, I guess, I'll just call it what it is. It's quotes. Quotes is too simple. How about quotable quotes? Quotes that matter. Or 2 quotes that Ben likes. Whatever the case may be. Here are 2 phrases, stories. I'm really having a hard time introducing this, can you tell? Anyway, here are 2 quotes that mean a lot to me. How's that? These quotes kind of sum up how I approach life, how I see things, and so let's go. First one, call it a clan, call it a network, call it a tribe, call it a family. Whatever you call it, whoever you are, you need one. That is a quote from Jane Howard, who back in the 70s wrote a book about families, and families being used as a loose term there. This was, during the time period of the hippies and free love and thinking outside of the box. Honestly, I really wish that I was alive in the 70s. I feel like that would have just been an incredible time of development and, whimsicalness. And I just think it would have been cool to be alive during that period. So for all of those of you who lived through the 70s, I'm jealous of you. So back to the quote. Regardless of her context in the 70s and what her hippie group might have consisted of, I think there's a lot of truth to her statement there. Let me read it again just in case you missed it. Call it a clan, call it a network, call it a tribe, call it a family. Whatever you call it, whoever you are, you need one. That's what I strive to have in my life. This whole podcast, honestly, is a pursuit to develop that network of people who are on my side, that network of people who know my story and who feel comfortable sharing their story with me. There have been several people that have reached out to me because of this podcast and kind of shared some tidbits of where they're at in life. It is so incredible. You're part of my network. You're part of my tribe. I really appreciate that. And then I hear that my wife has some coworkers whose husband listens and coworkers that listen. And it's just like, wow, that is really cool. And then Jason mentioned some far-flung relatives that he ran into at a funeral who acknowledged that they had been listening to the podcast as well. It's just so cool. That's how I try to live my life, connected, part of something bigger than me. It's also how I try to structure my own family. My daughter is black, and the other 3 of us, my son and my wife and I, are as white can be. And yet we are making a family despite our obvious color and cultural differences. Marriage is very much like that as well. Melding people of very different backgrounds together. And it's incredible what results from doing that. So I'm grateful for my clan, my network, my tribe, my family. People at church, our community group at church, talked about them on the last episode. My mentors, people that have poured into me over the years. Obviously, the family that I grew up with, my brothers and my parents and uncles and aunts. And of course, you guys too that are listening. I would not be who I am today without those people. And as introverted as I am, I need that sense of connection. And so do you. So if you're listening to this and you haven't been investing in your network or your tribe or your family, I would encourage you to step out of your comfort zone and find ways to open up and share and be part of something bigger than yourself. It's amazing what happens when we do that. So that's quote number 1 that stands out to me. Quote number 2 is something that one of my mentors, Dave Beach, shared with me. Gosh, I can't believe it's been so long. I graduated from Cornerstone in 2006, and I think I was probably a sophomore or a junior when he shared this with me, this quote, and it has stuck with me for so long. I'm going to say it was probably 2004 when my professor, Dave Beach, shared this quote with me. And it was something that he wrote down on a piece of paper and handed to me as if to say, you're going to need to remember these words. Those words that he wrote down, nothing essential stops when I rest. Nothing essential stops when I rest. Whew, it still gets me. I like to fill my life with activity and action and doing things. And in college, I was at a point of running myself completely ragged. I was so busy with class assignments, with being a youth leader at a church nearby, with speaking at various churches and chapels at Cornerstone where I went to college, stepping up and taking leadership roles in a couple classes. I was so busy that I was on the verge of having a panic attack. And one of my professors was clued in enough to notice, and thank God he was. Dave Beach, he taught a class about spirituality and settling down and really tuning into the Spirit. And it was such a moving class. And when I was meeting with him one day, he wrote that on a piece of paper after I had shared with him all the different things that I was responsible for. Nothing essential stops when I rest. Whew, it just gets me still. I love it. So those are two meaningful quotes that have meant something to me over the years and will continue to. All right. Well, we have reached the final segment. And for lack of a better term, and for just trying to keep things consistent, I'm going to go ahead and call this my unfiltered finale. You've heard enough from me tonight, and I'm honestly running out of things to say. So with that in mind, for my unfiltered finale tonight, I'm going to play for you a hilarious clip of one of my favorite comedians, John Crist, talking about cartoons he was not allowed to watch as a child. This is something that's come up on the show before. Not the comedy sketch, but just the fact that I grew up in a pretty sheltered home. And there's songs and movies that Jason and my wife, for that matter, will quote, and I'm just completely lost. Like, I don't even know what they're talking about because, well, I wasn't allowed to listen to those things as a kid. So, on that note, here is the audio, and be sure to check the show notes for a link where you can see this video. It's absolutely hysterical.
I put out this Snapchat, and I was like, I got over 1,000 responses of people that were things, Christian people, things they weren't allowed to watch as a kid. I'm going to read a couple of these to you. These are always my favorite part of the show. Just keep in mind, I didn't write these jokes, okay? In this bit, I'm just a vessel, all right? These jokes, it's like, I didn't write these jokes. This bit is like a Chris Tomlin song. I didn't write it, but I'm going to capitalize on it. You know what I'm saying? Oh! That was the Holy Spirit. Okay. Okay. Somebody responded and said, I wasn't allowed to watch Bambi because it didn't support hunting or the Second Amendment. We couldn't listen to AC/DC because the lady in my church told my dad it stood for anti-Christian devil children. Harry Potter, witchcraft, Pokemon, occult, My Little Pony, satanic. Smurfs, communist. Okay. Tom and Jerry, too violent. Care Bears, demonic. Caillou, parents too liberal. I don't know. I never seen that show. I don't know what that means. Sweet Life, disrespectful. Hannah Montana, Secret Life. Cat Dog, not how God intended it. I don't think God intended Bible characters to be played by vegetables either. Captain Planet, too environmental. Arthur, DW had a bad attitude. Land Before Time, evolution. Dora, immigration. Kim Possible, belly shirt. Rugrats, Angelica Talk Back. This is one of my personal favorites. Bill Nye, science. And lastly, Power Rangers, because our power comes from Jesus. There you go. There we go, everybody. Keep those kids on the straight and narrow.
Oh, John Crist. So funny. All right. Now I'm going to go ahead and play for you a song that really means something to me. It's a song you may be familiar with if you grew up in the church. And if you didn't, well, stick with me. It's going to be okay. The song is all about joy, but the way that the artist sings it does not sound joyful at all. It sounds like a dirge. And, you know, the thing that sticks out to me about this song is sometimes in life, things don't feel very joyful. Like the stuff I've been going through with my daughter this week, it is not joyful. Let me tell you. At least it doesn't feel joyful. Yet, I've been finding that even in those dark times, even in those difficult times, things are happening behind the scenes that I don't even understand. And things are coming together for reasons that are beyond my knowledge. And even when it feels like the wheels are coming off in life, even when it feels like I'm just about to crash and burn, I can still have joy knowing that there is someone bigger than me that's ultimately calling the shots. Somebody that cares deeply for me and wants what is best for me and is guiding me in those paths. Because of that, I can be joyful, even when things are tough. And when things are tough, I don't have to sugarcoat it and sing a happy song. I can just be real and honest and open. And I think that's what this song captures. So, without any further ado, here is the song, I Have the Joy Down in My Heart, by a gal named Tifa, who sings with a group called Page CXVI. I will be sure to put this link in the show notes as well. Enjoy.
I've got the joy, 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 joy down in my heart, down in my heart. I've got the joy, 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 joy down in my heart, down in my heart.
Well, I did it. I successfully did a podcast episode all by myself. Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of Threads. Whenever I finish a speech or a presentation, I just have this rush of, what are they going to think about this? Was that just a complete and utter flop? Did I just waste my time? That's where my mind is racing as I wrap this up. And I'm just going to not worry about it. And I'm going to stick to that quote I shared with you earlier. The things I talked about in this episode, they do matter. They matter to you if you've listened this far. And I am so grateful for the community that's been forming around Threads podcast, Life Unfiltered. I can't wait to see what happens in episode 32. So definitely stay tuned for that. And again, thanks for being a part of this. It truly is an experiment in vulnerability. Never thought I would do a solo podcast episode before, but I could add that to my list of things I've done. Enjoy the rest of your day, and don't be afraid to step outside of your box.